We begin the show tonight in the NFL with Thursday night football as the Dallas Cowboys beat the Seattle Seahawks 41-35. For the Seahawks, Geno Smith, he went 23 of 41. He threw for 334 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. DK Metcalf was balling, 6 receptions, 134 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. Helped me in my fantasy team. For the Cowboys, Dak Prescott had another great performance, 29 of 41. He threw for 299 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb, 12 receptions, 116 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. Here's Dallas Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott after the game.
Our Telegram, Dak, talk about the importance of winning this game against that team and the way you did, coming back close game. Because there was so much talk about you guys having these home blowouts and beating teams with non-winning records.
Yeah, we talked about the records earlier in the weekend, right? Can't pick how it's been matched up, but obviously know the stretch that we have coming ahead of us, and this was a big one to get, as you said. The first one with the winning record, but more importantly, in the fashion that we did, in a tough game, back and forth, down at halftime, down in the fourth quarter, and the guys and the team really just making plays when plays were needed and playing ultimate complementary football, stopping them, getting a touchdown. Obviously, defense getting two fourth down stops when the game was on the line was huge. So yeah, it was complimentary football at its finest to get a big win that's been different than most of these at home. And we can take, as Coach always says, a big chunk of confidence. We can take that into next week and just moving forward. And I think, if anything, the team just showed resiliency and belief in one another, belief in both units and all 3 units, and knowing that we can get it done, just staying at it.
That was Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott after the Cowboys 41-35 win over the Seahawks last night. So, for me, the Cowboys beating the Seattle Seahawks didn't really prove much to me, because all season long, when I look at the Dallas Cowboys, we all said and witnessed how the Cowboys, they are a team that beats up on inferior competition, but when they play against a team that's a playoff caliber football team, they always lose. We saw the Dallas Cowboys earlier this season. They got blew off the field against the San Francisco 49ers. We saw earlier in the season when the Dallas Cowboys went up against the Philadelphia Eagles at Lincoln Financial Field in a division matchup earlier this season. The Dallas Cowboys weren't able to get the ball in the end zone and beat the Philadelphia Eagles, a division game that they desperately needed to have. They came up short. But so far this year, the Dallas Cowboys, we've witnessed the Dallas Cowboys score 40 points 5 times this season. The Cowboys have scored 40 points 5 times this season. The teams that they scored 40 points against are as follows: the Giants twice, the Rams, the Commanders, and the Seattle Seahawks. Those are the teams the Dallas Cowboys have scored 40 or more points against this season. So they're beating up against inferior competition, and they beat up a Seattle Seahawks football team last night that has been struggling lately, and the Seattle Seahawks have lost 3 straight games. They've struggled over the last month coming into this matchup against the Dallas Cowboys last night. So I'll give the Cowboys credit, because we knew going into the matchup last night against Seattle that Dallas was a good football team. We already knew that they were a good football team, but we also knew they were a flawed football team, because when they go up against elite competition, they do not win those type of games. But they can beat up on teams that are inferior, like the Giants, like the Commanders, like the LA Rams. They can beat those teams. But when they go up against elite competition, they don't win those type of games. I feel like the Dallas Cowboys are similar to the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are the exact version of the Dallas Cowboys. The Miami Dolphins, they beat inferior football teams like the New England Patriots, like the New York Jets. But when they play against a Philadelphia Eagles or a team on the caliber of a San Francisco 49ers football team, or, when they play against those good teams, the Miami Dolphins usually lose those type of football games. We saw in week 3, I believe, the Dolphins lost to the Buffalo Bills. So I look at Miami and Dallas as being very, very similar football teams. Now, for the Cowboys, in those 3 games that they played this year, when they played against the 49ers, against the Seahawks, and against the Eagles this year, in those 3 games, 2 of those 3 games they lost, against the Eagles and against the 49ers. But in those 3 games, they gave up 35 points per game, and they gave up 373 yards per game in those 3 matchups against the 49ers, Eagles, and Seahawks. And they lost 2 of those 3 games. So defensively, in these games that mean the most, in these big games, defensively, the Dallas Cowboys have not shown up. They've not shown up. Last night, against the Seattle Seahawks football team that has been struggling offensively, they gave up 334 passing yards to Geno Smith. They gave up 406 total yards offensively to the Seattle Seahawks as a football team. Seattle went 9 of 14 on 3rd down. They had 25 first downs for the night. So I felt like Seattle was able to move the football consistently all night long. Defensively, the Cowboys have to get better. We already know up front, you got DeMarcus Lawrence. You got Micah Parsons, one of the best defensive players in the NFL. Okay? At linebacker, you got Damone Clark. In the secondary, you got all-pro veteran cornerback Stephon Gilmore. You got Deron Bland, who had a up and down game last night. There were times where Bland was getting cooked, and then there were times where Bland was making plays. He made the interception in the 3rd quarter last night as well. So defensively, the Cowboys got to get better. They have to get better. Now, the one person I want to give credit to is Dak Prescott. Ladies and gentlemen, Dak Prescott is having an MVP caliber season. You look at his numbers this year, Dak Prescott, 26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 3,234 passing yards. He's completing 70% of his passes. And last night against the Seahawks, when the Cowboys were trailing, Dak Prescott, he went 13 of 18. He threw for 125 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Dak Prescott, offensively, is the Cowboys' best player at the moment. He's playing at a high level. Now, he's having an MVP caliber season statistically. But, again, when I look at the Cowboys this year and some of their wins, they played the Giants twice. They beat up on the Commanders on Thanksgiving. They beat the Panthers in Week 11. Week 4, they blew out the Patriots 38-3. Beat the Jets 30-10 in Week 2. The Cowboys, to me, haven't had a signature performance against an elite team. So that means Dak Prescott has not had an signature elite MVP performance in a big game yet. It hasn't happened. It has not happened. In Week 5 against the 49ers, primetime matchup on NBC, Dak Prescott had arguably his worst performance of the season. 14 of 24. He threw for 153 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. So he was awful in that matchup. So, yes, Dak Prescott is an MVP candidate, and he's in the conversation. But I don't believe Dak Prescott is the current NFL MVP as we head into week 13, considering he hasn't had an elite signature performance against an elite opponent yet. So those are my thoughts. He's playing well, but I'm not ready to say he's an MVP quite yet. But Cowboys moving forward, their schedule is going to get interesting. They got the Bills in week 15, week 16. They are in Miami against the Dolphins. Week 17, they're home against the Lions. And week 18, they finish up with the Commanders. We'll see how they finish their season. They are a playoff team in the NFC, but they're not going to win the NFC East. The Philadelphia Eagles will win the NFC East, but they'll be a playoff team, and they'll have a wild card as we get into the playoffs. As for Seattle, Seattle's in trouble. They're in a world of trouble. They are 6-6 currently, and they got a tough schedule over the next few weeks. Next week, they are in San Francisco. Week 15, they're home against the Eagles. And then week 17, they have the Steelers. 3 games they could lose potentially as well. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with Seattle. But their playoff hopes with teams like the Packers, the Vikings in the mix in the NFC, Seahawks could be in some trouble. But those are my thoughts on the Thursday night matchup between the Seahawks and the Cowboys.